learn the lessons from Vietnam.
Once that war machine gets rolling, there's no way to stop it.
Our mission didn't make any sense. The things that we were doing were pretty much just to stay alive.
I turned it and would have just started shooting all of them if my sergeant hadn't been screaming at me not to do it.
That was a clip of What I Want You to Know, the searing documentary about the combat veterans' experiences in Iraq and Afghanistan, and it was executive produced by two Iraq and Afghan combat veterans, Travis Weiner and Tommy Furlong, who join me now. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here.
Great to be here. Thank you.
So I want to first, before we get to the sort of news of the day, talk about your documentary. Travis, starting with you, talk about the experience of talking with fellow veterans about their experiences and why you thought it was important to do that.
Yeah, thanks, Joy. Just a little background on the documentary. So Tommy and I are dear friends, but we first met working for a nonprofit, a veterans mental health and families nonprofit in Boston called the Home Base Program, which was a program that was founded by Mass General Hospital and the Red Sox Foundation to give veterans top quality mental health care, give their families mental health care, traumatic brain injury, etc. And one of the things that Tommy and I think, really kind of discovered working in the program, it was doing great things for vets, but unfortunately, one of the aspects that was lost was that a lot of vets we found felt similarly to Tommy and I, kind of about the wars and our experiences, and certainly didn't feel like, heroes that defended democracy. And in fact, sometimes kind of perpetuating that narrative can be, infantilizing and insulting to vets. And, there really wasn't a conduit for those vets to really express their views. We knew that we weren't the only ones, and we talked a lot about it. And we we both ended up leaving the program, and we ended up talking about making this documentary. And it was kind of serendipitous because the main producer and director, Katie Furch, who's an aunt of mine, had been a videographer and had recently retired. So the stars aligned. And then to answer your question more directly, we each had huge veteran networks, folks that we served with, folks that we knew from veterans organizations. And we wanted to be very, very careful and respectful about finding vets to film, right? So when I went to vets I knew, to talk to them about being filmed, we wanted everything up front and above board. And what we discovered is that, even a lot of vets that Tommy and I are dear friends with, they might not agree with us, right? They might have felt like, well, I don't know that that's, I want to do that. I want to help your film, but I don't want to do that. So there were vets that would send us, photos and videos and stuff. But we also found a lot of vets that did. One of the reasons, not the only reason that it took so long, is that it was very important to us as a team to get as much variety and diversity as possible in terms of male and female vets, in terms of their specialty in the military, in terms of where they deployed and what they did. Although the common theme that we absolutely wanted was that all had served in a combat theater in support of kind of one of the wars. So I didn't know if, go ahead.
No, absolutely. And Tommy, to go to you on this, because I covered both those wars from obviously stateside, working for a mainstream media outlet. And definitely when I would talk to people who were in like the family readiness units in Florida, there were complicated feelings about the war, right? There were people who were very proud of their service, obviously, but, over time developed some complicated feelings about that specific conflict and how you commemorate and celebrate that service. So Tommy, I asked, we wanted you on because this Saturday, what's going to be happening is a military parade, an unprecedented, what Donald Trump, the current president, is calling a celebration of the 250th birthday of the United States Army, a celebration of America, and a celebration of the victory in World War II. But that is coming at a time when the same administration is also cutting veterans' benefits, cutting the benefits that, go specifically toward preventing suicide, preventing health issues within, the community of veterans. How do you feel about the parade? And how do you feel about those cuts and those actions?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. It really ties into, the idea around the film too about what it means to support veterans. What does that mean? How does the civilian population look at veterans, and how do they view really supporting veterans? And what we saw a lot in our organization was much of it is pandering. We feel like the greater, especially forces at play right now, we feel like people look at veterans and they see dollar signs, or they see pawns to manipulate to push their specific agenda. Veterans are not a monolith, but when you look at the issues that veterans are facing right now, you look at the costs and you compare it. It's this sort of game we're doing of hide the ball, where, oh, look, we're supporting the military. Come to the game Sunday, and 10% of all proceeds for every Bud Light you buy will go to the Wounded Warrior Project. And a veteran comes out, they throw the ball, everybody feels good about themselves, but nothing was accomplished. This is what really Travis and I referred to as like passive patriotism. It allows people to feel good about supporting troops without actually having to think about how we support the troops. So you nailed it, Joy. While we're pretending like this parade is to honor the military, at the same time, 50% of all barracks have mold in them. Right, so we're sending any new join to likely have health problems in the future because he's breathing in mold every day. You look at the chow halls, the type of food they sell or they provide. The pay of a PFC, right? $29,000 a year to join the military and defend this country, right? The cuts to the VA, right? The debacle we had with the Veterans Crisis Line. These just parts of America that we always thought, okay, this is going to be here to support troops. Dismantling that while pretending like you're supporting troops. It's something that Travis and I have seen for quite some time over the years, and we see this as no different.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to square Travis, Donald Trump, who did not serve and who made sure he didn't. He said he had bone spurs and could not go and serve in Vietnam when a lot of his contemporaries did, and many died. And who, at least according to his former chief of staff, General John Kelly, did indeed refer to wounded veterans as losers and suckers, and those who died in combat as losers and suckers, who disparaged John McCain's service. You could go on and on. Sort of treating the United States military sort of like my brother's army men when he was a kid, where he would line them up and play with them like toys, as toys. They were toys. But these are human beings that he's now asking to kind of glorify him, and roll tanks down the streets of DC at a $45 million cost. Does it feel? It doesn't feel authentic to me, but I'm not a veteran. So I wonder to you, Travis, does that feel like authentic glorification of the military, or treating them like army men and toy soldiers?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, Joy, and you kind of teed it up, right? I mean, like Tommy said, it ties into our film because one of the things, and no question, Tommy and I have talked about this, the left got the wars wrong in many ways, right? But one of the reasons that kind of Trump rose to power is, he claimed, right, I'm against stupid wars. That resonates with a lot of veterans. What I think, as you talked about, the record demonstrates almost irrefutably is that he has no ideology, right? He has no actual morals or values. He doesn't care at all, genuinely, about veterans and people that serve in the military. And we have oceans of evidence for that, right? And so I mention that because to me, I think it's tied to his supposed claims that he never would have advocated for, authorized the wars in Afghanistan or Iraq, and the idea, right, that he kind of reveres the military. There was an excellent op-ed I read a few days ago in the Times by Jonathan Braver. The title was "The Military May Find Itself in an Impossible Situation," and it's great, and it touches on the idea that as in the military, right, as we are taught and under the law, you do not swear an oath to a person, to a commander, including the commander in chief. You swear it to the Constitution. And there are actual ethical duties of people in the military to refuse unlawful and or unethical orders, right? And so I unfortunately, we have a person who isn't qualified to lead a Boy Scout troop, let alone the United States military, right? And it's kind of, this came out a little bit with John Kelly, with Mattis, right, with so many other folks. And I have no doubt, I mean, Tommy can speak to this too, that amongst the officer corps, right, or at least amongst like moral, ethical, thinking, honorable people serving in the military right now, they look at him and are scared to death, right? Because this is not what our country about, what service is about. I mean, on its face, right? This is about glorifying the twisted psychology of this man child who has an eternal chip on his shoulder, right? Because he didn't serve, right? But he thinks going to military school makes it so that he can be compared to us, right? And so the nation pays millions of dollars, and we're shredding the Constitution in service of this person that is not only unqualified. And we can argue, right? People can disagree about whether he's qualified to be commander in chief. What I think the evidence is piling up about is that he is taking actions as commander in chief, shredding the very document that we all took an oath to uphold. So.
And last question to you, Tommy, because I had a friend reach out to me who did serve and has a lot of family who served, and who was telling me, raising the alarm, that many people that she knows that are in the service now are retiring early or leaving the service for ethical ground, on ethical reasons, because they do not want to be deployed against fellow Americans. And they're seeing what's happening in California as the California National Guard was essentially seized by the president. That is in court now, and it's in appeal right now because a judge ruled against him in that. And that there are people saying that I can't do this. I don't want to be deployed against my own people.
Yeah.
Do you have any concern, or do you fear that Pete Hegseth is stripping the military of people like yourselves, or people like the people that you interviewed who have a moral compass, and trying to drill down to those who will be willing to harm the American people?
Yeah, there's no question, Joy. The replacement of personnel, these loyalty tests that are being put into place. I mean, we just saw it that they vetted, folks at the speech the other day for allegiance to an individual, which is crazy. When you look at the military, it is supposed to be an apolitical organization, right? It is a microcosm of the American population. It is made up of Americans. When you look at polls for political leanings, you will find that the military is split basically 50-50. So this idea that the military is all Republicans, we all support this, and this sort of hijacking of patriotism is super concerning. And we saw the same thing in the build up to Iraq, in the early 2000s, and this was the replacement of intelligence personnel, right? The folks that were speaking out against the wars and actually telling the truth were quietly removed from service and replaced with people who are going to say yes and perpetuate the narrative. So this is something we've certainly seen before. I don't think it's going to be going away anytime soon. But the fact that when you understand that, okay, 50% of the people deploying likely disagree with this deployment, and that potentially they have family members in LA that they could be facing off with and squaring off with. The pitting of Americans against Americans, right, this is something that the founding fathers talked about very clearly. Washington was very clear, right? The deployment of active duty military personnel in the United States is the death knell of American democracy. It was said by so many of them. So extremely concerning. And when you look at the polls for veterans that support this parade, you'll find that the majority, about 60%, do not support it. And it's for the very reasons that Travis and I just spoke about.
Yeah, and I will note that a large percentage of people in the military are themselves immigrants or the children of immigrants, and so we pull from all sectors of our society to build a great military, and that is a good thing, and it should not be changed. I want to really thank you both for being here, Tommy Furlong, Travis Weiner. The film is called What I Want You to Know. It is available on Canopy. If you can get access to Canopy or download it, you can watch this amazing film. Please support this film. And gentlemen, thank you both for being here. And we do indeed wish the Army a happy 250th birthday, maybe just not this way. Thank you very much.